John Butch Arpino first met former Lucchese acting boss Louis Dedone in Pastels, a Bay Ridge, Brooklyn nightclub. Louis would always stand near the brass railing that was attached to the bar in Pastels. On a weekly basis, Louis would see Butch and a few of his friends hanging out at the club. So according to Butch, one day Louis called him over, and that's how the two of them met. Over time, Louis eventually put Butch on record with him. He also became very friendly with Butch's father. Fast forward, in and around mid-2000, Louis was placed in the acting boss position following the incarceration of acting boss Stevie Crea for an enterprise corruption case. But Louis' time in the position would be short-lived. And in December of 2002, the Southern District indicted Louis in a racketeering case. He also was indicted again the following year for charges that included murders. And by 2004, he received a life sentence, one he's still serving to this day in a federal prison in Tallahassee, Florida. Patty Delarosa was a protege of Louis and is how he became a member of the family. I know I've mentioned this before. Louis was a good guy and knew the life extremely well, and was also someone who would go out of his way to help you. I actually knew Louis before I knew Patty. In fact, when I mentioned this to Patty, I could tell he didn't like that at all, which is an example of Patty's character. Who cares who knew who first? From all the time I spent around Patty, one thing was evident. He didn't learn much from Louis and couldn't shine Louis' shoes. Louis had class and Patty didn't possess any. Where Louis displayed selflessness, Patty was blatantly selfish. Anyway, Patty claimed Butch when Louis went to prison. And it was a pattern with Patty because most of his guys, associates, all belonged to other people. Like, for example, Louis Jet, who was with Ray Argentina. In the mob, there's such a thing as poaching, when a member poaches an associate who belongs to another member. As far as associates go, their ultimate goal is to become straightened out, inducted members. And if you possess street smarts, you can usually tell which associate has the makings of reaching that goal. There came a point in time when Patty mentioned his wanting to do something for Butch, which equates to him wanting to put Butch up for induction. My initial feeling upon hearing this was that it wasn't meant for Butch. And I say that with no insult, and here was my train of thought. I've been in Butch's company many times. My opinion of him from day one was that he was just a nice guy, not a tough guy, or even a street guy for that matter. Butch owned a company called Small Packages near JFK Airport, a company that mostly dealt with deliveries. People may ask, if he was an associate of Louis Dedone, how wasn't he a street guy? Butch was a business owner. Louis took a liking to him, seen he had a business, and put him on record with him. However, you notice Louis, who went on to become consigliere and acting boss, didn't propose Butch for membership, which says a great deal. Back then, a group of us, including Butch, used to stay at Rare 650, which is a steakhouse in Syosset, Long Island. On Thursday nights after 10 p.m., it turned into a sort of nightclub or lounge. So we're in Rare one night, and Butch turned to me and said he had an embarrassing question to ask me. He wanted to know how you let another friend, an inducted member, know that you're also a friend. Now, obviously, Patty discussed with Butch his intentions of straightening him out, which technically Patty's not supposed to do. So after hearing the question, I laughed and told him, Butch, you can't let anyone know who you are. You can't introduce yourself on your own. It was uncomfortable for me to have to explain this to him, especially knowing he was clueless to the ways of that life. But I did explain that an introduction is done by a third party, a member, who knows you and the person you're being introduced to. So then he asked, well, what if you have to speak to the guy and you couldn't wait? I gave him the best information on how a person can go about that, which is the way you speak to the other person. For instance, when I had to speak to a member of the Colombo family, someone I wasn't introduced to, I mentioned having one of their captains come down to where we were, and he understood at that point what I was saying. So it's all in what you say and how you say it that lets a guy know who he's dealing with. Why else would I tell him I could call one of their captains to come down here? There could only be one reason. The guy in question was Gary Gugliaro, a Colombo member, and the captain I was going to call was Joey Amato. After speaking with Butch that night, I remember shaking my head. I understood not everyone knows how that life works. I didn't know everything there was to know and learned along the way. But Patty was basically putting Butch into a shark tank. He was totally clueless. I envisioned him sitting at a sit-down and getting eaten alive. During one, you need not only to know what you're doing, but also to be aware of how that life works. After that night, I met with Johnny Sideburns. John was someone who was in our crew, and he and I were close back then. We often would discuss certain things that were going on within our family. So I meet with Sideburns and reiterate my whole conversation with Butch. I explained that Patty told me he wanted to put Butch up. Sideburns went crazy when he heard the story. He couldn't believe it and said to me, "A guy like that got no business getting that thing," touching his shirt, which symbolized the button, and continued, "Now they have to hand out handbooks after they straighten guys out." Sideburns would famously point out guys who didn't know how to act or carry themselves, and use the term handbook quite often when speaking about certain people. I happen to agree with him. If an associate makes it to the point of being proposed, he should have some sense of how that life is lived. Or as Sideburns believed, if you don't know the life, you had no business in the life. If you haven't liked this video yet, please take the time now and hit the like button, as it helps with YouTube's algorithm. Also, for anyone who wants to show their appreciation for videos like this, or help me to continue making them, you can do so with the Super Thanks icon down below, or the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. Let me quickly remind everyone of my blog, especially those of you who still enjoy reading. It can be found at sitdownnews.com and is a paid subscription. I knew Butch didn't understand the life. My reasoning for shaking my head about inducting him was honestly because I felt he was too good of a guy, a business owner, a legitimate guy who's never been to prison. And for those reasons, I know that life is not for him. I've shown many examples of how treacherous that life and the people in it can be. And as a former friend of Butch, I never wanted to see that for him. When the Lucchese indictments roll around, and they will, I truly hope Butch is not named as a defendant.